event. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Jo Corrigan. I'm Director of Primary at Whole Education. And just to give you a little bit of background about me before kind of ploughing ahead into the event. So I'm an ex-primary head teacher. So I was a primary head teacher in Warwickshire for about 10 years before moving on to quite a large national network of schools, and then have now been working for Whole Education for about 18 months, which has gone extremely quickly. Joining us on the call today, we've got one of our project managers, Maddie, and we've also got James Pope, who is our Executive Director and also heads up the work that we do in relation to trusts. There's lots of information we've got to share with you today, which is fantastic, but I'm kind of conscious that I'd like you involved in the event as much as possible. So we're just going to set up a quick poll for you in terms of finding out what's brought you here today. We have got quite a large number of people that have signed up to this event, so hopefully they'll be able to join us as we move through. So we'll just give you a little bit of time to fill in what's brought you here today. And I think that's fairly unanimous in terms of the reasons why you're here. So everybody's here because they're looking to collaborate with like-minded school leaders, which is fantastic. And we can give you lots of information this afternoon about how we facilitate that at Whole Education. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to have a look at this afternoon, there's an agenda there for you. Just give you a flavour of who we are and what we do. We're also delighted to welcome some of our whole education school leaders here with us today, who I'll introduce to you a little bit later. And then find out the benefits of being part of a national network of schools. Now, just to give you a little bit of background into Whole Education and where we've come from. So Whole Education was founded in 2010, and we now work with over 500 schools and trusts and organisations who all share that commitment to provide a high quality whole education for the young people that they serve. I, as an individual, I'm really a real proud believer in the power of a national network and the impact that it can have on school improvement. Having kind of been a head teacher previously, I could cite lots of ways in which I found out about some really exciting opportunities that I wouldn't necessarily have found out about without being part of a national network of schools. And in terms of Whole Education, what I think is really special about Whole Education is the fact that you've got the vision and the mission there, and that hasn't really changed in the 10 years that we've been around. And we were lucky to be able to celebrate our annual conference this year prior to the national lockdown. And I think what's really important is because everybody joins the network and shares our vision and mission, that's what then lends itself to national networking and people showcasing the work that they're doing and then learning and collaborating with each other. And then in terms of what do we mean by a whole education? So we're really clear that we don't tell you what to do or how to do it. So you'll see there the three key ways and that we kind of refer to a whole education. And we, like I say, we don't tell you how to do it. What we do is we expose you to lots of schools up and down the country that are doing fantastic things, really innovative practice in their schools. So that's kind of what we do. And we do promote the skills, qualities and knowledge that children need in order to thrive in life, learning and work. And what's really been really important now more than ever is children taking ownership of their learning, being independent learners, being resilient learners. And that's what stood children in good stead over the last kind of 8 months or so, really. So I'll just give you a minute to read through those kind of 3 points there in terms of what we mean by a whole education. So in terms of kind of what we offer as an organisation, so as I said at the start of the meeting, we have a network, a national network for primary schools, for secondary schools and for multi-academy trusts, and we're increasingly working with local authorities to deliver programmes to large groups of schools, which is a model that's proving particularly successful, and we do that around programmes such as SEND and our spirals of enquiry. And then we also have networks based around the programmes, the CPD opportunities that we provide. So we have networks around SEND, around spirals of inquiry, around schools in their communities, and then some new strands that have come available this year that I'll talk to you a little bit about in a moment. So in terms of primary membership, our network is really growing, and our offer provides opportunities for leaders at all levels within your organisation. So we do have a standard membership offer that's available to all schools, but I think where it gets more interesting and exciting are those bespoke opportunities that we have by linking you up with other schools that are either a little bit further along the journey that you're on in terms of school improvements and your provision of a high quality whole education, or maybe working alongside another school from the other side of the country who is following a similar journey to yourself. So if I think about kind of recent examples of hooking people up, we've had a school who is in the process of doing their birthday celebrations. Their school is 50 years old very soon, and they are in the process of setting up an on-site farm. So actually what was really lovely is we were able to hook that school up with at least 3 other member schools across the country who had got well-established school farms so that they could learn from that journey that other schools had been on. And then another opportunity for kind of hooking schools up, which kind of sticks in my mind, is one where we had a head teacher in about March time who said that she was going to spend the whole of her Easter holidays writing a bereavement policy as a result of the kind of COVID-19 pandemic. And actually within kind of 10 minutes of the call ending, we'd managed to get her 3 copies of bereavement policies, one that had been tried and tested during the Manchester Arena bombings, which then meant that she didn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel and do that work in isolation, which I'm sure she was very appreciative of at the time. So in terms of the standard membership offer, certainly the membership year starts with either a one-to-one visit or at the moment a virtual call. And the purpose with that call is to meet the head teacher of the school and any of the members of the senior leadership team that are available at that time. And that's to find out where you're at in relation to your current provision of a high quality whole education, and then to map your engagement with us throughout the year ahead. That works really, really well, because then we can signpost you to opportunities that match your school improvement priorities. We also have a leadership programme which the vast majority of our member schools engage with each year. So this year we have 100 of our school leaders working on that leadership programme together. And I'll go into that in more detail at the moment so that you can see the different elements of the programme. We also have opportunities to visit schools around the country. So our We Inspire visits have been taking place virtually since March, but they are still going ahead. And they're opportunities to observe and find out more about specific aspects of a high quality whole education that's happening in other schools across the country. And again, if I think about opportunities that members have had recently, we've had a school yesterday who presented something called University Challenge, which was an initiative that they have in place to raise aspirations of children. We've had wellbeing at the heart of the school community. And then our next one is going to be on leadership development based on really good relationships within a school community. I've mentioned about brokering school-to-school support already. We also have a programme called We Lab Classrooms, which is a CPD programme for any member of staff in your school. And that kind of encourages teachers to engage with research and what works in terms of approaches to teaching and learning, and then to engage in trials in their classroom. So it could be engaging in a trial in their classroom with a view to improving their own professional practice, or it could be a trial that takes place in their classroom and they're a middle or a senior leader who wants to then spread that more widely across the school. Something else that's available to our members is our conferences that are available each year. So we have 2 very different conferences that are available to our member schools. Our national conference, as I've said, that we were lucky to get in kind of the start of the year, where you kind of come along, you get inspiration from thought leaders. And our summer conferences are a little bit different in terms of they showcase the work that our schools are doing up and down the country in relation to a high quality whole education. But as I say, we always expect an element of participation and collaboration at our events, and that's kind of where our kind of membership network evolves from over time. Other opportunities for you to get involved in through the network. So these are additional opportunities. So we have a Trust Leader network, as I've said, and that's been created with leaders from across the whole education network. And again, they share those common kind of values that we share as an organisation, but there are peer groups that then work together to share ideas and build solutions to the challenges that they're all facing. And obviously during the last 8 months, that's been incredibly helpful in terms of that peer-to-peer support. I know we have got a number of people signed up today who the trust offer might be particularly relevant for, because you've got a local authority role or you've got a CEO role in a trust. And as I said at the start of the call, James Pope is with us today, and he's happy to have a separate conversation about that at the end of this meeting, if that would be helpful. One of the other things that we're well known for as an organisation is the Spirals of Enquiry programme. So Spirals of Enquiry is an inquiry model that originates from British Columbia, and we're very lucky to work with Linda and Judy, the originators of the programme, who originally the programme was put in place 20 years ago to narrow the gap for disadvantaged learners, and we're the only organisation in the country that offers that programme, which is really exciting. And then in addition to all of those things already mentioned, we also have lots of partner organisations that we work with. To name a couple of those, we work really closely with GL Assessment. So all of the schools working on Spirals of Enquiry this year have had discounted access to the PASS survey. And for those of you that are aware of the Pupil Attitude to Self and School survey, we also work really closely with organisations such as Iris Connect and Voice 21. So lots of opportunities to not just learn and collaborate from the network, but also from the partner organisations that we work with as well. Okay, so moving on. So I said that I was going to talk to you about leading a whole education at primary. So this is our leadership programme, as I said. We do have 2 members of staff at least working on this from each of our member schools. So we have the head teacher and 1 other member of the senior leadership team working on this programme. And really, it kind of supports you on your journey in terms of a high quality whole education in your school. So there's opportunities to benefit from like-minded peers, from coaching opportunities, from support through collaboration with other schools. And we have at Whole Education a proven change model that we share through all of our programmes, in terms of if you're going to instigate change in school, what are the types of steps that you need to take in order to make that change as successful as it possibly can be. This is the timeline and the elements of the programme. So you'll see there's an element of self-review, which sounds quite scary when people tell you need to do that at the start of a programme, but it's literally 6 areas that I'll share with you in a moment that our schools kind of rate themselves in relation to. There's always a national launch event which takes place where everybody in the cohort can come together and meet each other. And that national cohort was launched in October this year, but we still have more and more people joining us on that journey as time goes on. And then we have a number of opportunities throughout the year as part of that programme to kind of go and visit other schools, particularly high performing schools from the Whole Education Network, to learn from them. And you'll be allocated a coach on that programme. And then at the end of the year, as a result of the work that you do, because you work on a focused impact project, everybody then comes back together at the end of the year to share their journey in terms of why did they choose to work on the strands that they chose to work on, what action did they take, and what impact did it have. So very much about kind of learning and sharing with each other. So I mentioned the school improvement audit. So this is a copy of the audit that we ask our school leaders to complete. So as you can see, it's not onerous at all. There are 6 areas to benchmark yourselves against. And the idea is that this isn't a 1-year programme. The idea is that we continue this journey as time goes on, and the hope would be that all of our schools would be at stage 4 at the influential whole education practice in all of these 6 areas at the end of their journey. And probably by that point, again, it would be time to review everything and start working towards those aspects again. So it is a continuous school improvement journey that we're on with our school leaders. This here, I'll be quiet in a moment and let you read this, because this was a really lovely comment from one of our schools that was involved in leading a whole education at primary next year. So I'll just let you have a look at that. And I think what it would be fair to say, what was really inspirational last year is, despite the kind of partial school closures that happened sort of towards the end of March, we still had school leaders who continued their journey through the Leading a Whole Education at Primary programme. You know, some schools that did some great work in relation to developing their vision and values or growth mindset across the whole school. So that work has still continued, and we have lots of case studies of schools that have been through all of our programmes that I've mentioned today, if people are interested in taking a look at those. Okay, so while you take a look at kind of those comments there from our current whole education school leaders, I'd just like to introduce you to some colleagues who we have here with us today. So we've got 4 leaders from our whole education network with us today, who love talking about their schools, and quite rightly so, very passionate about the educational offer that they provide for the children in their schools. And each have had, I think it would be fair to say, quite a different journey and relationship with whole education as time has gone on. So we're going to listen to these school leaders. We've got Carmela Rees, who is head teacher at St Peter's Church of England Junior School. We have Robert Cleary, who is head teacher at Sandringham Primary School. We have Kerry Scott, who is head teacher at Ainsley Wood Primary School, and Sarah Stepney, who is head teacher at Mayfield Primary School. So I've promised them that they can have a maximum of 5 minutes each to talk about what brought them to the whole education network in the first place, how they've engaged with the network, and what their schools have benefited from being part of the whole education network. So I'm going to hand over to Robert first. We've stopped sharing now, which is great, so that we can see them when they're talking. So Robert, I'm going to hand over to you.
You're on mute, Robert.
I think that's the 3rd time that's been said to me this morning. I'll start telling up. So welcome, and I'll just talk briefly about the journey at Sandringham Primary School that we had with whole education. We're a 4 form entry primary school in East London, just near Stratford. If you think of the Olympics, we're a stone throws from where the Olympics were back in the heady days of 2012. We've been with whole education for quite some time. I'd say about 8 or 9 years, pretty much from the start. And it was our kind of thinking as a leadership team that we had good networks within our local authority, which is Newham, but we wanted to look further afield and not just locally, but nationally, and then through whole education to think internationally as well, to kind of broaden our thinking. One of the big things for us was returning to see what the research said about how children best learn. There were some decisions that we had made which we don't think sat with the kind of the fundamental building blocks of how children learn. That having a really clear idea about what's the theoretical understanding of how children learn, not just in early years foundation stage, but all the way through to year 6. And we were able to engage with the educational thinkers of our time, I suppose it was. I remember one of our first whole education sessions, sitting and listening to John Hattie and Guy Claxton and Ron Berger, and just thinking, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. This is, I haven't heard these names since I was back at university, and we kind of tend to forget about what are those fundamental blocks. So whole education kind of pointed us in that direction. As Joe said, not just this is how you got to do it, but this is what you need to think about. What kind of school do you want to be? What's the experience of your children going to be? And they made us consider that. And that meant we built a really strong relationship with particularly Guy Claxton. Joe talked about the kind of the learning powered approach, and how we go about setting our children, how we go about talking to our children, how we set up a kind of the tribal classroom. And every year, I think we always kind of work towards going to the annual conference to kind of hear what's happening in the world of education. And it always feels like whole education are at the start of something rather than catching up. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the research-led approach. I enjoy listening to what the thinking is that's coming around the corner. And that's enabled us to be really agile with what we're doing as a school, and to come up with a set of values. We've got our 5 values. Those are the values that we make every decision by. because it's so easy to be pulled and pushed in certain directions. You've got to be doing this, you've got to be doing that. I was at one school and they were just, these are all the strategies that we're doing, you know, cognitive load, retrieval theory. But what sits with you as a school is really important. And within the whole education network, we've come across those schools who are steady, who aren't pulled by the kind of the orthodoxy of our time and think, what's the best for the children? Our first value is children first. So every decision we make, we put the children first, whether that's me setting the budget, whether it's the children, the way the midday supervision is talking to the children at lunchtime. But whole education has kind of held our hand on that and been an arm around our shoulder. And the idea about meeting other schools like Kerry, who's probably go next or next, I would never have come across Kerry if I hadn't been in Three Bridges, and if I hadn't been in whole education, and also three Bridges that I've seen today. Schools that share our same vision and values and the right ethos about putting children at the centre of things, and it's opened our eyes. It's a friendly, a friendly uncle to make sure we're making the right decisions. And that's what we need in education at the moment. Someone that's there for us, that isn't the kind of the stick to beat us. And I feel, just to finish off, I said a great sense of protection being part of this group, because I know that there's other schools out there doing the same as us, making those difficult choices and not always looking to the path of least resistance. This is a tricky and difficult job, and it's great to be with other schools that believe that as well. Is that okay, Joe?
That's lovely. I couldn't have written it better myself, Robert. Thank you so much for that. I didn't want you to stop, actually. So let's hope the others are so positive, which is exactly what we want them to be. Thank you, Robert. Can
I plug my book then, Joe?
We'll share some information about your book, Robert, as a thank you for attending today. Thank you so much. Right, Kerry, we'll come on to you next.
All right. Hello. Thanks. And yeah, thanks, Robert, because I would never have met you, even though you're just down the road and I even worked really close to you before. But yeah, I think to talk about just a bit about why Ainsley Wood came to join Whole Ed first was more about me than the school, I think, initially, because I accidentally became a head teacher, completely by accident, really, in 2013. And I accidentally became the head teacher of a school that was in the bottom 1% of all schools nationally. It was having a bit of a bad time, I would say. However, as somebody who, like Robert, I like a research-based approach. I like to think and reflect on all things. Throughout my teaching career, I kind of knew what it was I wanted, and I knew what it was that I believed a school should be. And I'm one of these people that is constantly asking the question, what is school for? What is the point of it? What is the point of all of this stuff that we're doing? And then are we doing that? And so that question kind of keeps me running in circles all the time. Then in 2013, when I came to this school that was in trouble and literally out of my depth, I stumbled upon the Whole Ed, a leaflet for the Whole Ed conference, and thought, I just need a day out, let me go and do it. And actually, that was one of those moments, kind of moments where everything kind of lit up for me, because I felt like I found my people. I felt like there were people around me who I wasn't fighting against. And that had been the issue leading up to that moment, is that I felt like I was kind of banging my head against a brick wall, really. People in this very traditional, it's not working, but this is how we do school approach, versus what was definitely going on in my head, and I was trying to kind of create. So I threw us completely feet first into Whole Ed following that conference in 2013, and then really got us involved in just as much as we could gather, really, as many members of staff as I could get involved in it. And luckily for me, I was able to find people who also wanted to drive forward at that time. Then the links that we were able to make across schools, from the conferences, all the learning that was able to be had, really helped to facilitate the conversations back here in school. And I absolutely agree with Robert about the conferences each year being the beginning of something. I feel like I get so excited about them, literally like a child at Christmas. And it's like my brain food, and people get a little bit anxious about me coming back and what we're going to be doing next. But it really does open up all of the conversations and all of the questions. Actually, Joe, following yesterday's thing about University Challenge, there's all sorts going on here. They need me to stop being involved, really. But now it works really at every level. What we've created here, thankfully, is a school that is passionate about solving the problems and really thinking outside the box about things. So we use a lot of research, we use collaboration. I mean, we're involved in that at every single level. And I've got members of staff now involved in lab classrooms that are fizzing about all of their initial sessions that they've had. We've got somebody on the leading a whole ed in primary course, again, like we always do. We always try to have somebody on there, and so people expect that they will be able to be involved in these things and then get involved in the conversations. The impact really is who we are. It's who we've become, because we certainly, I mean, we certainly wouldn't be where we are today, and not to say we're at the end of any road, without having the kind of advice, the contacts, the constant drip feed of information and knowledge that comes from whole ed for us. I have no idea where we'd be, but it wouldn't be where we are now. And so I literally thank whole ed for that, but I encourage everybody to get as involved as they can.
That's lovely. Thank you, Kerry. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that you say that the journey started because it was something that you as an individual wanted to be involved with. And I think as the journey with whole education progresses over the years, and actually right from the outset now, when we have these one-to-one calls at the start of the year, we're really keen to engage as many members of the school community with the offer as possible, because what that means is if other people are involved, if they move on to another school or the head teacher moves on to another school, actually that relationship with whole education can continue in the existing school and also in the new school, which leads me on really nicely, Carmela, to you. So Carmela was originally a whole education follower through her previous school where she was deputy head teacher, but fantastically has been appointed as a permanent head teacher now in a new school, and continues that journey. So over to you, Carmela.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great link, and listening to Robert and Kerry, just can echo everything you've said. I feel like I know you both. I've heard Kerry speak at various events in the past, and I've had the great privilege to visit Robert's school and have worked with some of his colleagues and have been really deeply inspired. And I think most of all thinking about Sandringham, was able to take some of our newly and recently qualified teachers over there to, teachers that have spent their training and career starting path in Hampshire, leafy Hampshire, and being able to take them to East London and visit, fantastic school there and bring back practice has been really inspiring for us. So for me as a new head teacher, I joined the school just 4 weeks before lockdown. The school has been graded requires improvement twice in a row, been through a really turbulent time. So it was I'd say it was more of a calling, the fact that I've stayed here, and I absolutely couldn't have taken on the job if it wasn't for the support of whole education. And I really do mean that. Despite, it's not just lockdown that can make you feel lonely in a new school where, a lot of change is needed, and knowing that we're part of the whole education now, and we can enable the staff here who have been very closed in and not very outward looking, to give them that experience and opportunity to network, not just with schools down the road, but further afield. And I feel being a part of the whole education network for some years now has grown me into the leader I am today, has really helped me to flourish with professional curiosity and that sense of courage, and definitely has been the right thing to join my new school now as part of the network as we grow through the network. So going back to the school that I've recently left, All Saints, we were part of the network from pretty much the beginning as well. And I know my head teacher at the time used to get really frustrated when she came back from county events and conferences, which were just continuing to talk about Ofsted. And she would come back and be really frustrated about that. And we just were looking to join something where actually we weren't doing it for Ofsted, we were doing it for the right reasons, and just absolutely brought into that vision of a whole education for our children. And I think what I've learned over the years is whole education isn't just about providing that for your children, it's for your staff too. And the events that we've been able to engage in over the years have really grown us as teachers and leaders. I think a real memorable event has to be in quite the early stages. It was an event called Open Walls, and it was just a day where we shared practice and we kind of formed our own agenda guided by whole education. And I came back into school just absolutely inspired, and since then we've developed our own scheme for character education inspired by a secondary school in Cambridge. It was the first time I'd ever sort of heard about flipped learning and use of iPads, and again it was about being open to that really leading practice, so that then we were one of the first schools in Hampshire who were then talking about flipped learning and using iPads and that sort of thing. And that's what I love most about whole education. I think Kerry touched on that, is you're just constantly immersed in forward thinking, outward looking practice. And certainly now as a new head teacher in a new school context, it's just giving me that sense of connection and helping us to move forwards.
Lovely, thank you, Carmela. And I just added in the chat as well that you've actually been fortunate enough to go to Vancouver through your involvement in Spirals of Inquiry as well. So I half expected you to say that as your kind of wow moment. But I'm sure if people join the network, you'll be more than happy to talk about Spirals and your involvement in Vancouver as well. So thanks, Carmela. Okay, so and last but no means least, Sarah, over to you from Mayfield.
Well, I've not got a huge amount to add to all that, but our journey started with whole education when I was asked to go to Vancouver, so I can mention Vancouver instead, by the Kite Teaching Alliance in Cambridge, and they were looking for a deputy head to send over to Vancouver to have a look at Spirals of Inquiry, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to go. But as a result of that, we joined whole education, and myself and I was deputy at the time and the head, we came to our first conference, and I think that for me was just brilliant. Had such an amazing couple of days, so inspirational, so positive, listening to all of the like you say, all of the research-led ideas. So that was for me the sort of highlights of whole education are the conferences. Absolutely love going to those and what we gain from that, and then we are very much part of the Spirals of Inquiry aspect of whole education, and connecting with other schools from within whole education who are participating and starting their journeys of Spirals of Inquiry. But from our perspective, we joined the Leading Whole Education for Primary group last year. We were part of it, and I think one of the things that that did for us was to put us in contact with other schools with areas that we were interested in. So we were interested in continuous provision, for example, going up beyond reception. So we visited a school in Birmingham to see how they did it. We also had a lot of contact with another school to do with pastoral care in, I can't remember where it is now, I've forgotten the name of the school, it's gone out of my head. But it's that putting us in touch with other schools who are always incredibly generous with their time. I think that's one thing that's been, really, really obvious, is that everyone's very positive, forward-thinking, and willing to share their ideas. And nobody's idea is the right way of doing it. People are just very open to new suggestions and different ways of thinking. And so the thing that you get from any of the meetings you go to, and I think Kamala was saying that when you go to local meetings, it's much more operational when we have our local network, and that's brilliant, and we obviously all need that, but it's quite operational, and we're talking about the things we're not able to do, whereas the one thing that with all whole education conferences or meetings, whatever, it's always talking about what can we do, and it's an incredibly positive experience. And I think, like the others have all said, we really want to look at the educating our children from their perspective, what's right for them, not thinking about Ofsted. Obviously everybody has to at some, to some extent, but our focus is very much on the children and what they need, and doing what we believe is right for the children. And it's just brilliant to be able to be put in contact with other people who are like-minded, who, that they're very enthusiastic and positive about education, positive about what we can do. So that for me is the biggest thing that we get out of it. And we've made some fantastic contacts, people that we keep in touch with the things that we're doing in school now. So
that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And actually really interesting that you said about that positive mindset. And I think, we've run kind of since March with the partial school closures, and obviously we would originally be meeting face to face and running our programs face to face and visiting each other's schools. We flipped our offer completely to virtual, literally overnight. The staff team all started working from home, and our offer was completely flipped to a virtual offer, which has been really well received. And one of the things that we put in place incredibly quickly were fortnightly support calls for head teachers. So whereas we would have had regular opportunities to visit schools, we then rebranded those We Inspire virtual calls, which are calls that take place on a fortnightly basis, where we have an inspirational input from a school leader, and then the remainder of the call is about what's going really well in your school, so with a focus on a whole education, and also what are the challenges at the moment. And I know yesterday one of the challenges that we were discussing in the virtual call was around the provision of extracurricular activities and how we could overcome that, and what sorts of things we would be able to provide within the constraints that we're working within. So there's always kind of somebody on a call, at the end of a phone, at the end of an email, to connect you with somebody who's doing something that responds to kind of any challenge that you've got. And I think one of the other things that I would say as well, and probably is kind of affirmation of what the head teachers have just said, is I think you get out of a network as much as you put into it as well. And we are a network who believes that our schools hold most of the answers in terms of, we can learn from each other, we can collaborate with each other. So we are very reliant on that. We do bring in expert speakers to inspire people, but we have very generous school leaders that we work with in terms of they're happy to host events, they're happy to talk, they're happy to share their experiences with people, as you've seen today. And obviously a network is very reliant on that. And we don't expect everybody who joins the network to come in the first week and say, yes, Joe, I'm going to host an event. I'm going to have 30 school leaders at my school tomorrow. I'm going to write a case study on best practice for whole education. We don't expect that from the outset, because everybody is on a journey with us, an evolving journey. So some people new to the organisation in those first kind of few years take more from the network than they give to the network. And that's absolutely fine, because all of our schools have been in that position at some point. But then as your relationship with whole education deepens and more staff are involved and your practice in school becomes more embedded, you then have that opportunity to give back to the network and also to shine a spotlight on your school on a national scale as well, which we're not very good at head teachers at blowing our own trumpet, but we certainly at whole education like to do that for you on a national scale through lots of different opportunities. I have got a couple of slides left, but actually it's much better to see your faces. So really it was to talk about next steps. So what do we do after today? So most of you that have joined the call today have joined because you wanted to find out and collaborate with like-minded people. So we'll have an opportunity in a moment to kind of respond to any questions that you have, or happy to take questions after the event. That's not a problem at all. But in terms of our offer for you today, to encourage you to join the network, obviously we're almost at Christmas now, which I'm sure you're all counting down to have that well-deserved break, hopefully during the Christmas holidays. But in recognition of the fact that you would come on board in January, we reduce our membership fees. So rather than paying £3 per pupil, you would pay £2 per pupil in your school from January. I know that's always the burning question on everybody's minds: how much is it going to cost me? Where things work really, really well are where we work with people at trust level, but that's not to say that we don't have single schools that are part of our organisation, because we definitely do. But one of the, so we've got Kerry, who is a single school who's with us, Carmela's a single school that's with us, Mayfield, Sarah's a single school that's with us. Robert joins as a single school, but then he's also part of a group of schools within his locality who we work really closely as well. So if you want to join the network, that's absolutely fine. Maddie will send an email after the event today to give you more information about that. We, like I said at the start of the call, we arrange one-to-one visits with all of our school leaders or trust leaders right from the outset, so we can understand where you're at in your journey, where you would like to go to, and how we can work together to achieve those aims that you've got. And then we begin to plan those professional development opportunities for all of the staff in your schools in terms of what you want to engage with. And I think the lovely issue that Carmela had at the start of this year is she wanted to be involved with everything. So sometimes it's great that people want to be involved in everything, but it's kind of making sure that you get maximum benefit from all of those things that you are participating in school. And then we can get you set up with those whole education virtual calls and opportunities to find out from all that great practice that's taking place across the country. So I'm going to pause there. So I'd like to kind of offer you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, either unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you want to pop them into the chat, that is absolutely fine too.
I was going to type just to say thank you for the input, because I've known Whole Ed for quite a long time, but it's just nice to hear what's going on. Thank you.
That's lovely. Well, I'm going to take it if there's no questions that I've responded to all of your questions, which is fantastic if that is the case. But if you have got any queries or any comments or any questions, please feel free to kind of contact us afterwards. You'll have our contact details because Maddie will be in touch with you after the event today. Before we leave, can I say a huge thank you to our whole education school leaders who have taken time out of their very busy school days to be with us today. Thank you very much for that, and great to continue working with you. I've just seen a comment in there from Karen. What is the best way to find out about all the available opportunities? So Maddie will send you after the event today an email which will have a link to the membership brochure for you. And then probably the next step would be, if that's something that you're interested in, we can get a call and get things sorted out through that way. All right. Okay, well, lovely to meet you all today.